Hello, James Daly here from TruthBeKnown.org. Welcome to episode 2, Behind the Shield of the ECFA, an organization that provides financial accreditation to 2,700 ecclesiastical organizations around the globe, totaling $38.2 billion and entailing 14 million donors. If you remember, their seal was used by Radiant on their year-end financial report, the financial report that appears to have been created by the marketing department, not the audited financial report from their accountants. In this episode, Radiant Church takes us behind the seal of the ECFA, behind the curtain, behind your and my perceptions and assumptions of what we believe a firm providing financial accreditation is actually doing, or perhaps in this case, not doing. We at Truth Be Known are simply going to provide you with the facts so you can weigh the information and decide for yourself if the ECFA enhances your trust in the ministries that carry their membership seal of accreditation. The term accreditation or certification tends to naturally carry a lot of significance in our culture and is used by many different professional organizations. However, we have to be careful not to assume that every organization's use of such a term carries the same meaning or scrutiny as to what that of another organization of which we may be accustomed to is doing. First, let's start with the ECFA and what they are not. The ECFA is not a governmental entity. It is a private organization. Unlike the AICPA, the American Institute of Public Accountants, that accredits accounting firms and works hand in hand with federal and state governments, the ECFA has no relationship or government coordination. In addition, while the state boards of accountancy regulate accountants in each state, the ECFA has no such relationship with the states. In other words, the ECFA is an entirely private organization without any checks and balances from any governmental bodies. And while the ECFA purports that it includes a peer review process, we have been unable to ascertain what that process actually is. From what we can tell from the ECFA's own website, it is certainly nothing like that as being robust as a peer review process required by the AICPA membership for accountants. In that case, a CPA firm who performs audits is required to have a peer review by an independent executive committee that actually comes in person to their offices and performs their audit by applying significant scrutiny to ensure integrity. From what we can tell, no such process exists within the ECFA for their membership, other than occasional check-ins, which are sometimes conducted virtually and not in person. In our view, such a process has nowhere near the accountability that is offered by CPAs in the accounting profession. However, the ECFA is using the same terminology of significance, that being accreditation, certification, and peer review. Next, we want to bring to your attention that there is absolutely no significance or authority that the ECFA accreditation brings an ecclesiastical organization in reference to dealing with any accounting firm, state, or federal agency such as the IRS. If one of these entities arrived and wanted to audit the church books and the church responded, "But wait, we have an ECFA accreditation," we are suspect that they would probably ask, "Who is the ECFA?" and then restate their inquiry for all the records to be made available for their audit. Remember, the ECFA has no state or federal government relationship or coordination. Please understand that the ECFA seal of accreditation would carry absolutely no weight whatsoever with these regulatory bodies. So what does that mean? Well, that simply means that what the ECFA offers is a voluntary participation program by churches to what it has coined as accreditation requirements and standards of responsible stewardship. So again, a church pays the ECFA a significant fee and then submits to a voluntary program of requirements and standards, at least in part, to be able to display their seal as a tool to convince you as a donor that you can trust the church of whom is seeking your donation. That ECFA seal at face value can and has proven to be very effective in the hands of churches to gain public donors' trust and increase giving. Why else would churches find value in it? What's interesting to us at Truth Be Known is, wouldn't full transparency accomplish that? Trust, and also avoid the significant fees charged by the ECFA? Let me say that differently. Wouldn't full transparency bring the most credibility and trust to the ministry out of any other process? And it's free, thus equipping the church body to opportunity cost of the ECFA fees by applying those directly to ministry, rather than a seal of credibility that they should already have. Before we get into the specifics of the ECFA and Radiant, here's a bit more background on the ECFA. The ECFA was formed in response to threatened federal legislation. In referencing an article from InfluenceWatch.org, a series of scandals rocked religious media leaders in the 1970s. This community was warned that if they failed to police themselves, the government would step in with federal regulation. In response, the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and the United States branch of World Vision founded the ECFA in 1979. Its mandate was to accredit Christian organizations by practicing transparent standards of financial disclosure. I want to highlight the claimed historic statement, police themselves, and to practice transparency. Again, I want to remind you that the ECFA and its accreditation policies have no government oversights or checks and balances from any state or federal officials. After Radiant's Board of Elders sent me the letter from hell, throwing me out of the church for asking for financial transparency, we want to remind all of you that we went back with 4 other couples of Truth Be Known, who all signed a letter requesting the financial transparency and bylaws. Also remember, all 5 couples were then informed by Radiant's legal counsel that we were not the right type of members to see such information. After this rejection from Radiant leadership, denying something that many churches simply hand out, we started to research the ECFA website and began reading about what they coined their 7 standards of responsible stewardship. We remember being very impressed by what we were reading. Everything we read appeared to be very comprehensive, and they quoted a lot of scripture. However, we also remember being very alarmed upon reviewing these 7 standards in more detail because it became quickly evident that Radiant Church appeared to not be in compliance with many of these standards. We were immediately confused on how Radiant could be accredited, given the fact that they clearly appeared to be in non-compliance, most notably that of standard number 5. Given these findings, we proceeded to contact the ECFA. We originally contacted the ECFA on April 19th, 2022, and were directed to submit an online complaint, of which we did the next day on April 20th, 2022. The ECFA responded to our complaint stating under ECFA standard number 5, a ministry is required to provide the most recently completed CPA-prepared financial statements and any specific project reports for projects we gave to. Notice they said we gave to. That being, for example, the City Center project. After communication exchange, the ECFA agreed to my request to come and meet with them in person. I flew down to meet with them on Wednesday, June 15th, 2022, and spent the better part of 2 hours explaining our situation to Jake Lapp, VP of Member Accountability, and Bruce Raymer, Director of Compliance. I showed them documents and noted the standards of responsible stewardship that Radiant appeared to be in violation of. Jake and Bruce were both very polite as well as respectful, and they asked me for copies of all the documentation that I had brought with me, of which I gladly provided to them without reservation. It was in this meeting that they informed me that the letter from hell was only the second worst letter that they had witnessed from a church to a member. In closing of our conversation, I could read from their body language and expressions that they were bothered by what they were presented. And I believe that they were earnestly empathetic and troubled. As they sat back and were pondering the information, I inquired as to what the next steps might be in this situation. They talked to each other, and then they communicated that they could list on their website that Radiant was under review. I responded by stating that this would be very helpful in our efforts to receive the financial information we have requested. In looking back on this, they really should have placed them under review as a warning to prospective donors. Unfortunately, this did not occur. And instead of continuing open and ongoing communications with us or jointly with Radiant, they turned to have ongoing continuous communications solely with Radiant Church, their client, essentially leaving us out of the loop on what was occurring. While we did not want to expect anyone to scorch the earth, we did expect the ECFA to have a swift response to Radiant's noncompliance, like any other accreditation or certification organization. Unfortunately, that was not going to be the case either. On July 17th, a month later, we sent a follow-up email further listing additional noncompliance concerns with other standards of excellence. On July 28th, 2022, the ECFA responded by stating that they had been in contact with the church and will be taking steps according to their accountability processes. Please note, this ECFA communication clearly recognizes that Radiant was out of compliance. Please also note, this is 3 months after we had made our official online complaint, and nothing has been resolved. You can be assured that such a lack of disciplinary response related to such critical monetary matters would never occur with an organization such as the AICPA. We want to ask you, does this enhance your trust in the ECFA's seal of accreditation? They also inquired if the church had provided a copy of the financial statement to us, of which we responded they had not. Over the next few months in the fall of 2022, we were told by the ECFA that they had flown up to meet with the Radiant Church on 3 separate occasions in their process of working with them. Yet the audited financial reports had still not been produced. Radiant was still not in compliance with ECFA standard number 5. Despite many months and many in-person visits from the ECFA, in our view, the ECFA should have simply sent a written correspondence, with or without a courtesy call, that states, we have had a complaint, you're out of compliance, and you have 3 business days to get back into compliance, or we're going to terminate your accreditation. This is a type of disciplinary process that would have reasonably been expected from an accreditation or certification organization to follow in order to uphold its credibility to the donor public. We have posted all of our correspondence with the ECFA and the ECFA's legal counsel on our website, along with a timeline of events under our resources tab, where you can read for yourselves the back and forth communications over those many months. Radiant Church did eventually list their financials on their website in February 2023, more than 10 months after TruthBeKnown filed this complaint with the ECFA, and almost 2 years from when we first requested the financials from Radiant's board. Radiant posted 3 years of financial reports, 2019, 2020, and 2021. Why did they post 3 years worth? We questioned if it was because they had no proof to the ECFA that they had ever been made available since 2019. Now keep in mind, they had only become accredited in 2019. As the public donors who brought the non-compliance of one of their members to their attention, wouldn't you think it would be reasonable for the ECFA to view us as the end customer, as the donor, and give us a courtesy reminder or communication that the financials had actually been displayed on the website? It's clear from their actions that they do not see us as the customer, but the church board who is employing them and paying them with the money that we donate. Lastly, Radiant has now posted their 2022 financials and removed the previous 3-year statements. Why? They have also totally changed their year-end summary financials that they post on their website. The ones that look like they are being created by the marketing department, those. It not only gives us a few numbers and does not show the ECFA or the Cap and Krause logos as they had for years before. At least before TBK questioned this. So we ask, Why such drastic changes to these visual communications since TBK's questioning? To add insult to injury, the ECFA issued a letter to Radiant Church thanking them for being in continued compliance. That's what I just said. Continued compliance. I affectionately call it the love letter. This letter from the ECFA is misleading, in our view, in that it misrepresents the facts to the church members, the public donors, and failed to mention Radiant's failure to be in compliance for years. That's what I said, for years. But instead gave them accolades and praise for being in continued compliance, which is simply not true. The ECFA confirms in their own correspondence a second time that Radiant was out of compliance with their January 9th, 2023 email stating, "Our overarching goal is to work with members to come back into compliance with ECFA standards." I appreciate your patience as we work through this. When we pressed Jake Lapp, VP of Member Accountability, as to why the ECFA authored such a letter of misrepresentation to Radiant Church, Jake responded by stating that their goal is to pursue compliance with positiveness. Upon pressing back on this matter further with Jake Lapp, what did they think that they did? Yeah, they lawyered up. That's what I said. They lawyered up and had their legal counsel contact us. We want to drive home the fact that the ECFA had an opportunity to correct this misrepresentation in this letter and denied to do so. So I ask you, does this enhance your trust in the ECFA? The ECFA has not been without its own share of controversy. If you do a quick search of the ECFA, you will find many stories of prior controversies containing various allegations against the ECFA, and in some instances, its leadership. We will provide links to several of these stories on our website, truthbeknown.org. If you're interested in learning more about this and what has been alleged, we encourage you to read these articles. These are all very educational and fascinating reads, but let me share just a couple of examples here for sake of time. In 2019, independent journalist Julie Roys and others, including World Magazine investigative reporter Michael Renault, alleged that they had documented multiple instances where the ECFA overlooked egregious violations of its accreditation standards. According to them, the ECFA failed to act as an umpire, allowing organizations with disastrous financial mismanagement to continue to carry the ECFA certification until the problem was publicly exposed. In referencing the Roys report, one of these allegations involved Harvest Bible Fellowship, the Chicago-based church pastored by James McDonald. According to these sources, the ECFA continued to accredit Harvest Bible Chapel even after reports surfaced of potential fraudulent activity, like using money given to Walk in the Word, a broadcast ministry of the former World Harvest pastor, James McDonald, to purchase and develop a deer herd at the church's camp in Michigan. As Julie Roys reports it, even though the ECFA said McDonald's salary was unremarkable, it was discovered that McDonald's regular annual salary plus deferred compensation was nearly $1 million a year. This was in addition to Pastor McDonald's so-called executive checkbook, which McDonald used to pay for things like safaris and an extended vacation in Naples. Hearing allegations such as these have led us to question just how rigorous the ECFA's accreditation standards really are, and to what level of scrutiny they are subjecting their members to protect we the donor public. Being in a period where there seem to be so many churches and pastors committing moral failures, isn't it puzzling why so many fellow Christians are immediately responding by stating, "This can't happen to our church"? Why is that? I think we can all agree that the integrity of a church or faith-based organization is critically impacted by its senior leadership. An example of this are the allegations against Dan Busby, the past president of the ECFA until he passed in 2020, who, according to the Roys report, was allegedly fined for using the CPA designation years after it had elapsed. According to the Roys report, Busby was allegedly fined $9,000 in 2016 by the Virginia Board of Accountancy, the VBOA, for the unlicensed use of the CPA, Certified Public Accountant's title, in at least 38 publications, his personal website, the ECFA's website, and the church law and tax website. The VBOA also apparently required Busby to pay the additional administration fees to cover their investigation. Look at the contrast between the disciplinary action of the ECFA to that of the AICPA in reference to the president of the ECFA, utilizing the CPA designation without holding the CPA license. According to the Roy's report, the VBOA didn't mess around. They promptly contacted him, informed him to pull all of their logos from their documentation, fined him, and then made him pay for the investigation that they had to conduct. In contrast, and to further echo the response by Jake Lapp to us at TruthBeKnown, Michael Martin, the new president of the ECFA, responded to Christianity Today article by stating, "It's a redemptive approach. We're really trying to build up organizations rather than tear them down." So I ask you, does this enhance your trust in the ECFA seal of accreditation? We want to bring to your attention to the fact that Radiant Church had only been a member of ECFA since March 8th of 2019. Then Pastor Lee is coming and seeing me less than a year later on March 4th of 2020, requesting additional financial support from me. Then, upon our second meeting in December 2020, where Pastor Lee gets upset about me questioning the purchase prices of the properties downtown, and I tell him that I want to see all the financials, and he's standing up sneering, turning his head side to side, while he is stating to me, "We don't need to give these to you," and further stating they're audited and accredited by the ECFA. And then after all of that defensive confrontation, we actually discover that per the ECFA, they're required to provide these documents upon request. I'm not sure who at Radiant wanted to obtain the ECFA accreditation. They all seem very proud to tout it around like the Holy Grail, yet they all seem to be very ignorant as to the requirements and the standards of excellence when we ask for financial transparency. How is that possible? It's not, and here's why. Within the ECFA website section, How Does Accreditation Work? And scrolling down to the standards check-in program they discuss, that is a periodic review that's conducted virtually for some members, on-site for others. They go on to state that the on-site check-in includes face-to-face meetings with several representatives of the ministry, such as the executive director, lead pastor, CFO, board chair development director, and many others. So if this standards period check-in program by the ECFA is actually occurring, there's no way that anyone within those roles at Radiant Church can plead plausible deniability that they were not clearly aware of the requirements of this accreditation. However, if the ECFA is not conducting these on-site check-ins with Radiant Church and are doing a periodic virtual review, that could explain how Radiant appears to have been non-compliant since they received their accreditation in 2019. So I ask you, does this enhance your trust in the ECFA seal of accreditation? Let's now look at the ECFA standards of excellence. The ECFA has 7 standards of which the church must comply. In respect of time, let's start with standard 5. In this standard of transparency, it is important to note that we have requested all the church's financials. And this is where it all started at TruthBeKnown. We initially asked for information on the Downtown City Center project, at that time, which was just basic financial estimates and budgeting of the project. But that has now turned into our request to see all of Radiant's financials, including expenses, balance sheets, payroll reports, credit card statements, etc. This entire situation is based upon Radiant's rebellion not to give such financial transparency. As we have communicated, they have undoubtedly already spent a lot of money with attorneys and seem to be willing to give up all of our tithes and offerings to deflect us from seeing this information. That's a lot of money they're giving up rather than just exhibit full financial transparency. Why? Remember, it was only when our requests for financial transparency from Radiant were repeatedly denied that we began looking at the certifications that Radiant claimed to have on their website, coupled with Pastor Lee informing me that they were accredited by the ECFA. That is what led us to the doorstep of the ECFA. And that is where we were surprised to learn that this Standard 5 requires Radiant to provide us its financial audited reports upon request. The ECFA states in this standard that every organization should provide a copy of its current financial statements upon written request, and shall provide other disclosures as law may require. The financial statements required to comply with Standard Number 3 must be disclosed under this standard to public donors, we the church. We first requested these audited financials in April of 2021. They were never provided to us. After almost 2 years of applying pressure on the ECFA, the financials were finally posted to the Radiant's website in February of 2023. Unfortunately, we have still not received anything on the Downtown City Center project. In the second part of Standard Number 5, the ECFA goes on to state that an organization must provide a report upon written request, including financial information on any specific project for which it is sought or is seeking gifts. We want to repeat the exact verbiage, sought or seeking. In our case, this would have been Radiant's keyword seeking of additional funding for the Downtown City Center project. This is a clear violation of Standard Number 5. However, the ECFA has turned cheek on this by stating that I was not a direct donor to the project, thus failing to enforce it, stating that I had not yet given to the project. That's what I said. Let's go back to the exact language of the standard, sought or seeking. So it appears that the ECFA is taking the position that the church doesn't need to give us any of this financial data until after we donate for the project, even though it says they're seeking funding. Is anyone else confused? So I ask you, with the actions of Pastor Lee coming to see me directly, inquiring for additional funding, doesn't this fulfill the requirement of seeking? It also states that every organization shall provide a copy of its current financial statements upon written request, and other disclosures as the law may require. Well, the law may not require, but isn't it reasonable to ask for budgets, estimates, and other data as I did for the project to become acquainted with it in order to give substantially to the project? The financial statements required to comply with Standard Number 3 must be disclosed under this Standard Number 5. An organization must provide a report upon written request, including financial information on any specific project for which it is sought or seeking gifts. Again, in our case, that being the gifts it was seeking for Downtown City Center project. We also informed the ECFA that communications to us from Pastor Lee in his video as an update on downtown mentioned they use cash on hand for the project.
We've used a lot of cash on hand.
Wouldn't the use of cash on hand and even the fact that they're refinancing of all assets make us donors for this project and a reason to be eligible to receive such important financial information? I want to inform all of you again that to date, we have not received any financial reports in reference to details on the Downtown City Center project. The bottom line is this. For almost 2 years, we were seeking financial documentation that Radiant was required to provide us, pursuant to this Standard Number 5. But Radiant's leadership refused. Does that sound like Radiant was in compliance with these ECFA standards for those 2 years? Of course they were not. I don't think it could be any clearer. Well, apparently not for some. Despite this obvious and abject lack of financial transparency, we have one of the overseers at Radiant recently addressing the matter after he was questioned by a caller. Let's watch the clip from Dr. Michael Brown on his podcast, Line of Fire, which is coincidentally aired on Truth Network. Please play the clip.
Financial accountability?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, just to jump in here, I know exactly what you're speaking of. We did receive the reports. This church is at the highest level of financial accountability of any church I work with in America, in point of fact. And according to everything that I have seen, this is a disgruntled person who was rightly confronted by leadership and then left and has been trying to create all kinds of trouble. Everything I've looked at, even this person's individual story, they make it clear this is a personal gripe. I 100% stand with the leadership of this particular church. I'm not going to give a platform to abusive comments about them here, but I 100% stand with them. Not only are they part of ECFA, but they have an audit on a very high level, far beyond what is needed, and are absolutely open, accountable. I can ask any question on any level.
In summary, Dr. Michael Brown, a Radiant overseer, states that I 100% stand with them. The church has the highest level of financial accountability of any church I work with in America, stating not only are they part of the ECFA, but they have an audit on a very high level, far beyond what is needed, far beyond what is required by law, or even biblical ethics, far beyond, excelling on every level. In reference to his statement about the ECFA, a lot of people tend to place a lot of weight on that ECFA seal of accreditation, to the point that they don't even seem to want to look at facts presented to them that could question their ministry. As I said in our last video, either Radiant leadership has lied to this man about the circumstances, or he is willing to defend the church leadership regardless of the facts. We have spoken with others that have a great deal of respect for Mr. Brown, so we can only assume that he has been lied to by church leadership. We would welcome an opportunity to discuss these transparency issues with Dr. Brown if he is willing to do so, and let the truth and biblical wisdom prevail. This all reminds me of a statement that I heard a long time ago. A man who was once misinformed was finally confronted with the truth. The man then had a decision to make, to either walk in truth or to walk in dishonesty. Without the bylaws, we cannot currently confirm whether or not Radiant is in compliance with the other standards, because Radiant refuses to provide any information about how it is governed, including a copy of these bylaws. The ECFA, with all their standards, does not require a church to provide their bylaws. Obviously, this is problematic. To remind you all, to date, we have only been given excerpts of the bylaws. Radiant's leadership has repeatedly used the bylaws as an excuse for not sharing financial information with TBK, and yet they continue to fail to provide us with a complete copy of the bylaws in order to verify their claims. This is true even after 10 of our TruthBeKnown members formally requested a copy of the bylaws in writing. Instead, Rick Burmeister has provided an affidavit through Radiant's attorneys stating that I had not satisfied Radiant Church's requirements for church membership as set forth in the church bylaws. They provided an excerpt, but further stated, accordingly, Mr. Daly is not a member of Radiant Church. Interestingly enough, his affidavit also states that the current bylaws of the church were signed and made effective on February 23rd of 2016, and that there have been no new bylaws adopted since that time, and that affidavit is going to be very, very interesting. In addition, communications with Radiant's legal counsel, they stated that Radiant is afraid to provide the bylaws in that we might weaponize them against them. As I stated in episode 1, the bylaws of an organization stipulate how the organization operates. Is it a board-led organization? Or by the actions of this group, a pastor-led organization? Who has what authority? Who owns the assets? And what are the rights of the congregation? Without being given a copy of the bylaws, we cannot confirm if the excerpts provided are accurate. It appears, with what little information that we have, that the only voting members are the Board of Elders. However, with one of the board members informing me that he doesn't see all the numbers, then how are we able to confirm? If the Board of Elders are not seeing every financial document, if they are not in control of every financial decision, and are only being made aware of actions after the fact, or on a need-to-know basis by management, how is this standard being fulfilled? Lastly, if the board is not making all the financial decisions, including compensation of the senior pastor and others within the organization, who are the voting board members? So without being provided a copy of the bylaws, we can only speculate as to who the voting members of the church might be. Maybe the only voting members are Pastor Lee, his sister-in-law Kendra Zondervan, financial director, and Rick Burmeister, executive pastor, treasurer, and secretary. If that's the case, then we would obviously have concern that this does not constitute independent board governance, as all three have a personal stake in the use of the church funds for such things as their salaries. Given that the latest Lara filings reflect Rick Burmeister as the financial director for 2023, then we are down to speculate that only two voting members exist, that being Pastor Lee and Rick Burmeister. So does anyone else see a problem here? And how does this enhance your trust in the ECFA? The bylaws would help answer questions about whether or not Radiant is complying with these other ECFA standards. Standard 3, financial oversight. For example, Standard 3 requires the church to have proper mechanisms in place for financial oversight. Under this standard, the ECFA states the board shall review the financial statements prepared by an independent CPA and any other reports prepared by the accountant. With this, the board may receive from the CPA recommendations relative to financial mechanisms and procedures within the church. The board shall be apprised of any significant deficiencies in these reports, material internal control weaknesses, or significant risks. In response, the organization should develop appropriate responses to those deficiencies, weaknesses, or risks. While we make no accusations, we would like for you to join with us in asking Radiant leadership if they have had any embezzlement or fraudulent theft from employees over the years, and if so, to share such details with the congregation and the amounts and how it was handled, as well as the processes put in place to prevent such matters from occurring again, if of course they did occur. I raise this as a concern for this reason. When we were first seeking financial transparency from Radiant's leadership, I had a conversation with one of the elders, Paul Orley. I had contacted him to discuss the financials surrounding the downtown project. I've known Paul for over 30 years, and he was actually my first employee. I texted Paul on February 12th, 2021, to ask him to give me a call when he had 5 or 10 minutes. As I briefly shared my findings, Paul quickly snapped back stating, "I don't see all the numbers." I then responded, "If you're not seeing all the numbers, I'm even more concerned than before I called Paul." Paul then snapped back and said he didn't say that, of which I stated, "Yes, you just said it." Paul then became very irritated with me and claimed that I was putting words in his mouth. I'm going to cover more about this situation in future videos, but again, I want to ask you, why is Radiant's leadership so confrontational? We're not making any inflammatory statements or accusations of wrongdoing to them. We're simply asking for financial transparency. And it's causing them to become immediately defensive and combative. Why? It is logical and reasonable that Radiant's leadership should answer questions from you, the congregation, about all of the ECFA standards and provide a copy of the bylaws that show how the church is being governed. The congregation is funding the church. Certainly the congregation has a right to see how the church is being governed and to be provided documentation showing Radiant is complying with all of the ECFA standards. The ECFA states themselves that their board and standards advisory committee are amongst the finest experts in the industry. Let's go to the ECFA website and meet their staff. Warren Bird, Senior Vice President with a PhD, is the head of research and equipping. Stacy Brown, Senior Vice President of Member Accountability. Not a CPA, but notes that she leads a team of CPAs to assist existing members in accountability. Jake Lapp, Vice President of Member Accountability. He is not a CPA, nor lists any significant accounting experience. Bruce Raymer, Director of Compliance, states that he is a CPA. This is then followed by numerous compliance team associates. Upon reviewing their board, it wasn't discovered to be a group of independent financial accountants, CPAs, or advisors, but pastors and church employees. Does this type of oversight cause you to have enhanced trust in the ECFA? We believe these finest experts in the industry, as the ECFA claims, should all know better and should be very aware of everything we have brought to your attention today. It saddens me that these individuals are willing to come to work, collect a paycheck, and stand behind the ECFA seal, thus telling the world that their members are of the gold standard. Yet it appears they are doing very little to ensure that this is in fact the case. They should be ashamed for issuing the February 2023 love letter that misrepresents Radiant's ECFA certification status by failing to acknowledge that Radiant was not in compliance with the ECFA standards for years. We think this is a huge injustice to donors by giving them a false sense of insurance that has not been adequately validated. Remember, the ECFA was not even aware that Radiant was not in compliance until we at TBK brought it to their attention. So I want to ask you again, does this enhance your trust in the ECFA? I want to give you a hypothetical. I want to give you an example of just how serious their failure to act in reference to Radiant's non-compliance for years could have been. For 22 months after we first requested financial reports from Radiant, we waited. What if during that period there were donors who checked into the ECFA website and found no statement that Radiant was not in good standing or was under review, and then gave a considerable donation to the Radiant Church project downtown City Center, maybe even before or after the love letter that misrepresents the facts of Radiant's compliance, only for the donors to find out now that Radiant had not been in good standing for years. This is in total disregard for the public donor of whom their seal is supposed to protect. So why did the ECFA allow Radiant to operate in good standing, even though it was apparent that Radiant was not in compliance with all of the standards for years? Why did they not place them under review online to warn givers in the meantime, while they determined and confirmed that Radiant was in fact compliant? Shouldn't looking out for the donors have been more important than catering to the church? Why doesn't the ECFA require the bylaws to be provided by a church when they know the significant importance of them in order to vet compliance with several of their standards? Why did they give Radiant approximately 8 months to continue to operate with their accreditation when they knew they were out of compliance? Why did they flap to meet with Radiant 3 times during this period of time when they were not compliant, but yet not keep us updated as the congregation? How much did the ECFA charge the donors of Radiant Church every year for this accreditation? And do we get any money back for the time period of which they weren't in compliance? By the way, how much did they charge to fly it for 3 special meetings? Why aren't they providing questions like those posed by our third-party accounting firm analysis that we engaged? Why did they provide a letter giving Radiant applause and wrongfully communicating that they've always been in accreditation when they hadn't been? Why did they issue a letter of compliance to Radiant before? That's right, before the church had actually provided the financials to the congregation and posted them on the website to fulfill being in compliance? And so I ask you, does any of this enhance your trust in the ECFA? Or does it make a mockery of its credibility? In closing, the ECFA may or may not have started out with good intentions. But in our opinion, based upon our experience in dealing with the ECFA, as it relates to Radiant Church, it is that the ECFA appears to have lost its way or its saltiness. Matthew 5:13 states, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet." Given our firsthand experiences at TBK, and unlike Dr. Brown, we have become deeply disillusioned with the ECFA. It is also my opinion as a donor that the actions of the ECFA discredits any value in their accreditation And it is my further opinion that they have acted in a manner that is false, misleading, and deceptive to me as a donor. We at TBK will be contacting Senator Chuck Grassley, who initiated federal oversight of ministries in 2011. But the attempt was thwarted. By who, you ask? Well, read some of the articles we have linked on our website. I think you will find it all very interesting. In addition, we'll be lobbying in order to bring necessary governmental oversight and whatever remedy we can pursue to correct what appears to be a failed system of self-policing, to ensure that God's funds are properly monitored. We hope that you have found this episode very educational and enlightening in reference to the ECFA and the financial transparency of Radiant Church. We will be back very soon with episode 3, and we'll see you then. Hello, everyone. I know many of you have commented online about the chair and have called it my gilded throne. But actually, it's not my chair. It's Mario's chair. And did you hear what they said about your chair? Did you hear what they said? What do you think about that? You want me to get out of your chair now? Okay. All right. See you soon, folks.